Welcome to part 2 of your goal creating process. Let's get right into this. So, in the first video, we broke down a good way to set up overarching yearly goals, your New Year's resolutions, as it were. And in this video, we're going to explain how you take those resolutions and break them down into focused monthly goals. This is the part that most people don't do, and honestly, it's one of the most crucial steps to achieving your goals. A variety of lists will be your absolute best friend here. So, as you can see here, what you want to do is go through each of your yearly goals and break them down into smaller steps. As you can see, this is a separate board. So on Trello, I have a yearly and a monthly goal board. The monthly is where I get specific. And the best way to explain how to break things down is to just show you how I've done it. So, starting with my lifestyle goals, specifically the push-ups. 50 push-ups, especially if you can't do any, like me, is a lot to ask. It seems absolutely inconceivable. But what about 4? As you can see, I broke that 50 down into smaller increments, and so by the end of January, I just have to do 4 push-ups. Seems easy. As you can see, you still have to build up to those 4 push-ups, but it's easier, So January will be 4, February will be 8, so on and so forth. And that's going to be the basics of everything, is breaking that big goal down into smaller increments and writing that shit down. Once you write things down, it feels more feasible. It feels like a plan. It feels like something you can do, and your brain says, okay, this is a thing I need to do now. And that's the biggest difference. And so out of the entire process, the monthly goals are the ones that you want to stick to the most. Out of the entire process, monthlies are going to be the biggest ones. Set deadlines and stick to them. Everything else can be finagled to a degree, but these are going to be what keeps your motivation mostly intact. Make individual cards for each item and break them down into lists. Add a description of what you're shooting for, and then when you're setting up your month at the start or writing down what you've accomplished at the end, these are the cards you'll refer to and cross things off as you finish them. So, for YouTube, I plan to upload 2 videos a week, which works out to about 8 videos a month or so. By the end of each month, by the end of each month, what you'll do, if you've achieved that goal that you set up, you mark it off the list. Boom, done. And as you could probably notice here, I have crochet on this list, and that's because before YouTube, I usually had some kind of yarn work related goal. I've taught myself both how to crochet and how to knit, but I've kind of grown tired of it. And so I decided to take it off my goal list this year, and I just want to finish up the one project I have left going, and then anyways, on to the arts. So I plan to do speed paints once a week, and if you achieve that speed paint or sculpt once a week, you click it off. Simple. Writing, on the other hand, writing is kind of hard to break down, like everything else. You can set up word count goals or writing hours, but that doesn't always equate to the same amount of progress like everything else does, especially if you're a novelist like me. I've been working on a series for 14 years now, and none of it's published. Because it's not ready to be published yet. Because it is Tolkien levels of huge. However, this year, I decided to focus on finishing these Sin stories. I already have one done, so that just leaves 6 left, which works out to an even, 2 a month. Makes it easy. But, I'll show exactly how I break that down later. But writing is one of those goals that you just kind of have to work out for yourself what you can do and what you want to and can do, especially depending on what kind of writer you are. If you're a novelist, it's a bit more difficult, but for things like short stories and poetry, it's a little bit easier to break them down into specific numbers. And every writer should have a blog. I don't make the rules. But you can do blogging. And that's much easier to break down into a specific checklist with specific rules. 1 upload a week. But for novelists, it's one of the hardest things to quantify outside of word counts, but moving on. The video game that I'm working on is one of the biggest reasons I had to rework my process of it this year, because there was so much to it that I was feeling a little overwhelmed. So I first broke it down into sections that's needed. So art, script, programming. Obviously, there's going to be a lot more to the programming than what's listed here, but I'm still relatively new to coding, so this is going to be one of those figure it out as I go kind of things. But I've written down what I do know offhand, based on what I've already done, mostly. But I broke it down into what I need, and then in the next step, I break it down into deadlines for each. But for now, just figure out what each bit requires, if you're working on something big like this. And then, obviously, we have reading. 3 books. I'm reading the second Game of Thrones book right now, and I'm almost finished with that, so hopefully I can finish that soon. So, but you can kind of see in this board more than the last what I mean about Trello being helpful for organizing everything. You can color code and add lists and descriptions and comments, links, images, whatever you need, however much detail you need to these cards. So then in the monthly completed list here, this is actually relatively new. I added it last year because I actually normally track what I finish in a physical book, but when mine ran out last year in the middle of a pandemic, I was like, nah. So I just added what I normally do in the physical planner to the Trello list. So what I usually do is break it down into reading, research, a planned list, and an extra list. Reading is reading, obviously. Research is for my books. That's going to be pretty unique to me, obviously, unless you're also a writer. And then the planned list is for anything in these lists here that I finish for each individual month. And then the extra is just for anything extra that I happen to do. So it gives me a comprehensive list, a comprehensive look at everything I did each month. So that's the main part of this. And then, at the end of the month, I take the comprehensive list and move it, list it down in the goal progress list in the yearly. The big thing is just writing down what you've done so that you can look at it and be like, oh, I actually did a lot. Because you'd be surprised how much you actually get done. But the next step for this, which I actually added this year, is breaking all of these monthly pieces down into dates. And I do this in Google Tasks. Because I was having a hard time visualizing everything all together in a Trello in a way that I liked. So I started with the general monthly goals and set deadlines for each one, and then worked from there. So normally I set my goals purely for monthly, but with the addition of this system of deadlines, I realized bigger things needed longer periods of time to work on them. So I broke these down into bi-monthly goals, specifically with the Sin stories. And luckily there were 6, so that works out perfectly. So over in Trello, I added the due dates, so during the next 2 months, I know I need to work on them, and they're there at the forefront of my mind, but I also know that they're not due until the end of February. Or until the end of the next month. Whatever it is. And as you can see, not everything is in the main goal list. And that's because, for the bigger things, I broke them down into their own separate lists. So for YouTube here, you've got the speed paints or sculpts once a week, and what I'm planning to do is paint or sculpt a week, and then one gaming or talking video. So you'll get one speed paint, one, extra. And so it'll probably, if all this is according to plan, you'll get a speed paint, an extra video, and then the next week it'll be a speed sculpt and an extra video, and yada yada on and on like that. Obviously, this week is going to be the exception because I'm doing the goal videos, and I want those to come out, one after another so that you're not waiting 3 weeks to finish making your goals. But after, essentially, January, this is the rhythm that I intend to get into. So you can kind of see what the general plan is for the channel here. And then the other bigger one that I broke into its own list is the visual novel. For the visual novel, I took the lists from Trello and threw them in here, kind of put everything together how I thought they might work, and sectioned it off before giving it deadlines. There. So, for example, you can see here by the end of February, again, a bi-monthly goal, I want to have everything for this character's route finished. And yes, that does say kitten. But basically, I broke it down by the individual characters and then gave them bi-monthly deadlines. And then the overall game, stuff like the main story script, the music, the programming, the UI, playtesting, all that stuff, I just figured out how to get this done, how I hope to get this done by the end of the year. And between the two, Trello and Google Tasks, it helped me visualize and figure out exactly how I want everything to look on a monthly scale. This is probably the part that's going to take the longest, I'll be honest. Especially depending on how many projects you manage. And what projects you're working on. Some things are easier to break up than others. But I've learned with a lot of the creative process, nothing's ever easy. But if you are somehow not like me and doing 30,000 projects all at once, it's going to be a lot easier to break these down. But this is, in my opinion, the most important step in the entire process. But the one most people miss. They set a goal, and sometimes they set up a daily schedule or even weekly schedule, but they don't set deadline. They don't break it down into months. They don't do the bigger chunks. They just have the big and the vague, and then they have the tiny and specific. But it's these ones that are really going to make the difference. And so that's why a lot of goals fail. So if you take nothing else out of these videos, take this one. Set deadlines. Break things into pieces and set deadlines. And get a little bigger here. If you'd like to learn how to break these down even further and make them even more doable, the next video will be covering how to set up a weekly schedule to break all of this into manageable time constraints without annihilating your brain trying to keep track of what to do when. So, that'll be coming up next. In the next video. Bye!